I'm wondering how many of you have spent any time today just sitting silently. I'm guessing not very many, because silence isn't a priority in our society. I remember my daughter saying when she was in college that the only time she had anything approximating privacy or quiet was in the shower. We are bombarded by noise, and we're constantly in motion. The idea of just sitting quietly for a while and not doing anything sounds almost un-American. Kind of a colossal waste of time, really. But for me, silence is essential. About 25 years ago, I was living alone for the first time in years. I noticed that when I was in total silence, no music or noise of any kind, things began to surface that would otherwise have remained suppressed. Ideas, questions, unfinished business, images, memories. I found myself reading every book I could get my hands on with the word silence in the title. Most of them talked about the power of being quiet, even for a brief time. The need to watch the effects of silence on my own life became so pressing that I decided I needed to go away for several days and just steep myself in quiet. I called a monastery in eastern Iowa and explained that although I was not Catholic, I wanted permission to come there for a while in exchange for a small donation. They not only graciously agreed to let me come, but they offered to pick me up at the bus stop. For the next week, 7 times a day, starting at 3:30 in the morning, a bell signaled a service, sometimes just a 10-minute service, sometimes a full mass. Instead of using a watch or a clock, I let those bells structure my days. During the periods between services, I read, I took long walks by myself, I wrote in my journal. The monks who lived there and the few other guests ate their meals in total silence. I learned that there's a huge difference between just eating alone in my apartment and eating silently with deliberation. I was always surprised when it was time to go to bed because the days slipped by so quickly. My dreams were particularly vivid that week. I can still remember them. So I wrote them down, and with the help of one of the monks, I worked with them. The week was like an emotional vacation because I had time to process everything that surfaced, and I was away from the noise and the bustling. I didn't know where all this was leading, but I felt I was on the right track. When I got back to Des Moines, I noticed that there were long lines of people at the grocery store. I had had no contact with the outside world while I was at the monastery, and I had missed the news that the flood of '93 had left Des Moines with no water. On my way to pick up water from the National Guard, I saw a sign advertising the Des Moines Zen Meditation Center. I have not owned a car for 30 years, but the Zen Center was only a mile from my apartment, so I knew I had to find it. The following Sunday morning, I joined a small group of people sitting silently on cushions facing a wall. Later, over coffee, as I was trying to make sense out of the practice, Bob, an experienced meditator and now a good friend of mine, offered some advice. Just let the weirdness of the experience carry you through it, he said. That weirdness has carried me through 24 years. Soto Zen meditation has offered a structure that lets me carve out up to 40 minutes a day of silence in an otherwise overscheduled life filled with multitasking. Almost immediately after I began to meditate, I noticed that I was less angry, less frustrated, more patient, especially in the classroom. I was teaching at-risk ninth graders, and I noticed that my efforts to remain in the present moment, to focus on what was going on with whatever that moment brought up, resulted in better presence with each of my students. I could be fully with them. I was less stressed, more engaged. I was less reactive and more responsive to what they needed. That thing I just mentioned about staying in the present moment, that's the part that's not so easy. The human brain, for some reason, likes to think about the past and the future more than it likes to stay in the present moment. We love to do instant replays of that time that was so horrific or so exciting that we think we need to relive it. Or we escape into the future perfect time, the next meal, the birthday party, or one of my favorites, what I'm going to do with all that Powerball money. Sitting in silence allowed me to pay fuller attention to the experience at hand. We can get lost in the anticipation of something that will happen on Christmas morning. But when the moment finally happens, we realize that it's never like we envisioned it. Now, what is it that we're trying to escape when we get out of that present moment? Some kind of discomfort. The media messages in our culture tell us we should feel good every waking moment. That if we have the slightest bit of discomfort, we should take something, or eat something, or drink something, or buy something, or watch something. But if you've been a student or a teacher, you know that it's often in those moments of discomfort that we learn and grow and shift. Sitting silently in discomfort helped me become okay with that state and to notice its impermanence, to realize viscerally that nothing lasts. 5 years ago, when my daughter died from an alcohol and drug overdose, sitting silently every morning allowed me to watch grief come and go, arrive sort of like an uninvited guest that stayed too long. But it also allowed me to avoid piling more pain on what was already there. Because unlike those media messages, silence allowed me to try to stop pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain, and instead experience both of them with awareness, knowing that neither would last permanently. Our iPhones and our social media put us in contact with dozens, if not hundreds of people in a day. So it's easy to lose contact with our own interiors. But a few minutes of silence every morning helps unfold the awareness that the way I place my shoes by the door, or answer an email, or fold a towel, are crucial, because those moments can be satisfying only if they're done deliberately with my full attention. Thank you for your full attention.